This is the Henry's Child Podcast. Am I crazy? Or am I just raving?
Late last month, we completed our last of the CD release shows for the record I Have Become. And the last show that was considered our record release show was in Grants Pass and was with our friends Vile Experiment and After the Rain. After the Rain is fronted by a really cool guy named Scott Watkins. And Scott Watkins played guitar and sang for the band Thresher. And if you were around in the mid-90s in this Eugene art scene that we sort of celebrate and talk about, there's no doubt that you would have either seen 2 Minutes Hate or Thresher. I mean, we played with Thresher hundreds of times. And we got to know Keith, Matt, and Scott very, very well. So what follows is a podcast with Scott Watkins. And because we did it 100% remote, we were actually in a hotel room. And before this, let's just say that Rich and I had sort of pre-started the celebration. And in fact, we had not only pre-started the celebration, but we actually had set up some microphones and recorded that pre-celebration. So maybe if you're lucky and I get enough good feedback about this, I will post that podcast. But for now, it's important for me to convey to you that Scott's girlfriend, named Rebecca, and Rich are actually sitting on the bed, kind of like, watching us kind of interact. And I left in a bunch of talk back and forth because it really is not only very meaningful, but it actually asked better questions than I had. So that said, thank you in advance for listening to this podcast, even though some of the quality is not going to be the greatest. But I'll tell you, Scott's answers are gold. He's a wonderful human being. And when he gets a record out with After the Rain, please buy it. In fact, we'll actually play some music once we actually get it on here. So here's me talking to Scott Watkins down in Grants Pass at the Best Western just a couple hours before our show. So did you grow up here in Grants Pass?
I did grow up here. Well, I was born in Klamath Falls, and I lived there until I was about 5. And my dad was a radio disc jockey and traveled all over the place. Went to school in San Francisco and just kind of gravitated up through Grants Pass or in Klamath Falls, ended up at KAGI radio, AM rock, almost like WKRP in Cincinnati.
AM
style.
rock station?
Yeah.
And where was that?
Right here in Grants Pass.
Right here in Grants Pass. Okay. So AM rock, so that must have been the early to mid-70s probably?
75 on. We moved here when I was 5. I didn't get to go to kindergarten. That's what stumped my educational growth.
So you're telling me that you went directly to first grade?
I did.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what happened, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what's wrong with me.
Wrong is so subjective.
But yeah, we started here. My dad was a DJ at KAGI, and I was privileged enough to be able to hang out with him on work days and, go through the record stashes that they had there. So I learned a lot about music by going through what was called the Gavin Report, which was a paperback book of the top 100 songs of every genre. It didn't matter what format the station was in. It could be country, it could be easy listening, it could be rock. But you got the top 100 of everything. And so what I enjoyed was going through that book and listen. I mean, the top 40 was cool when we were youngsters because it had people like Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks, Stevie Wonder,
right?
Elton John.
Sure.
Nowadays, you can't say so much about that, but I got to look at the bottom 60, and I would find bands like, Wall of Voodoo, or the Human League, or the Cure, something bizarre, Aztec Camera.
or what was considered bizarre at the time.
Yeah, I believe it was the very beginning of alternative music,
Oh, totally. Of course.
Yep.
Of course. And so what I also hear in that is even though you're finding these obscure bands in the lower 60, it's still AOR. So it's still album-oriented rock as opposed to single rock, which is what we have now. So my big diatribe I've had on the podcast is first off, people will release one song that will be the single. Then people don't have enough attention span for that. So they'll buy the ringtone of the single, whatever, right? And so what you're talking about is album-oriented rock. So The Cure for you may have been, and again, like the poke through was like Disintegration, right? Where you're like, that is just so, like even my 15-year-old daughter is really into Disintegration. And because I think it's so timeless, it spoke to itself, but it also just held up for such a long time.
What a lot of people don't realize is there was probably about 8 albums before that came out.
Right. Oh, from The Cure?
Yeah.
Specifically? Totally.
So I'm gonna say at least 6.
Sure, totally. Well, they had time to kind of build that and let it breathe.
Before they became, me and my friend Keith Brown, and you guys know Keith, we went to see The Cure in '85 at the Civic Auditorium. It's called the Keller Auditorium now in Portland. And we didn't know. We bought our tickets from G.I. Joe's in Medford. Yeah.
Yeah, baby. I remember buying tickets from G.I. Joe's. Sure. Yeah. I remember waiting in line to buy tickets
we waited
at
in line too.
Totally.
And we didn't know where our seats were, and we didn't even care. When we got there, the ushers took a look at our tickets and walked us to the very front row, dead center in the middle of the stage. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
And we didn't even know.
Were those like $5 more than the other tickets or something? No.
And there was only probably about 300 people there. And we showed up, ushered to the front of the stage. We thought they were touring The Top. They were actually touring Head on the Door. Oh, right. Uh-huh. So it has Kyoto Song and... In Between Days. In Between Days, that's what I was thinking of, yes. And what a great record, too. And we had to jam on that, like in a room just like this, and share a Walkman so that we could catch up on the songs that we were going to hear because we didn't even know that album was out. So pre-internet, pre-cell phone, we went into Tower Records and saw a Cure album that we'd never seen before. And it blew us away. Yeah. And then to go and watch them play, they played super low budget. They broke a snare during the show, and it stopped for half an hour. Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, man. That would never happen today. No. That's awesome. Okay, so this is 1985 when you went and saw The Cure at Keller Auditorium. Life changer. So, and you were with Keith Brown, right? So you were still in Grants Pass. Mm-hmm. I got a question on the outside if you can pick me up. Yeah, go ahead. Did you meet Keith here in Grants Pass? Yep. Okay. We met in high school. That's Rich talking in the background. Go ahead, and I'll repeat your question.
My question was about Keith because when I talked to Keith before, and I know he grew up in the Bay Area because I grew up in the Bay Area.
He did, yeah. San Jose.
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Okay.
Me too. And I was always wondering how you guys hooked up. I didn't know if you hooked up here or was after you moved to Eugene.
We met in high school, actually, and Keith was in journalism class, and he saw me roll in. Man, I looked like a weirdo when I rolled in as a freshman. Not so much. I was more of a butt rocker back then. Like
really?
I had my ears pierced, and I rolled up in fake leather pants. And
it's beautiful, man. Wow.
And Keith was
Were you tall back in high school as well?
Wait, I remember high school, Scott, and it wasn't like that.
Well, Keith took one look at me and said, "You need to come to journalism class with me." and we did, and we wrote music. Reviews and whatnot. We went to shows.
Nice.
And and that's how we met. And then Keith was a pretty good drummer before he started playing guitar. And then we started jamming, and that was it, really.
Was Keith older than you?
Just by a year or two.
Okay, so he was a sophomore when you were a freshman.
Yeah.
And you came rolling up in your butt rock pants.
Yeah.
Right? And you probably had hair down to your back.
No.
No?
I had kind of a rocker mullet a little bit.
A rocker mullet. Okay, cool. cool. I can see those. Sure.
And Keith's was worse than mine, though.
Well, Keith had the dreads when I met him.
Well, he had a high school dude that we won't mention.
Okay, well, it must be 84, 85, sure. Okay. So you meet Keith.
Yeah,
okay,
and I really looked up to him, and we had a lot of the same interests. So, yeah, we wanted to start a band. It was real simple. I was supposed to play bass, actually, before I started singing. And then the Cure thing kept coming up. We would play the songs through the PA just to learn how to play.
Oh, that's cool.
Basically, the Cure taught us how to play. So, not much I can do about getting rid of that.
Yeah. So you meet Keith, and you're in high school, and you complete high school, and then you move to Eugene. So how did you make it to Eugene? I mean, aside from obviously driving and finding a place to live, what happened? How come Eugene?
As After the Rain, and we're going to play tonight with you guys, reunited after 30 years. You know, we took a hiatus. We were playing down here in Grange halls and in VFW halls and whatever we could rent. And then we went to Max's Tavern in Eugene.
Okay.
Before we were of age to even be in there. So they took us in. They told us we could play, but you had to hang out over here. And we got a little taste of what felt like a big city. So we got
sure.
From going from Grants Pass to Eugene seemed like a big step for us, and we enjoyed it. And the people supported us, and they liked how gothy and weird that we were.
What year was that, Scott?
I'm gonna say 87.
Oh, okay.
87. Okay.
So what clubs were in Eugene at the time?
Nothing really. Max's Tavern was
Max's
really
was still there, okay.
really.
But you
the
know,
only.
Max's makes sense because it's 2 blocks away from campus, so it sort of feels like it's right on the edge of like all the stuff that's happening. Because even back then, the hospital was right on the corner too, which was kind of this big ominous.
And even still, in Eugene was a very dead town at that point. We poked at it a little bit from down here, but it wasn't until later on when you guys and Floater and Jollymon and a whole bunch of different people came in and made the rock and roll scene a little more exciting in the Eugene Springfield area.
Right. So like 92, 93-ish.
Yeah. And it wasn't until about 95 where it actually started to pop a little bit.
Yeah.
93, 95. And there were some other bands that I'm forgetting about. Man, there's so many bands. Addicted.
Yeah, Addicted.
The Riot Girl stuff started to come in.
So I'm going to pause here for a minute. So Scott just said something very profound that I have not seen anything as clever as this. It's an all-girl punk band named Addicted, but spelled A-D-I-C-K-D-I-D.
Yeah.
So take that,
Take
Oregon.
that L7.
Yeah,
That's why I'm addicted this night.
And
take that L7.
And Kaya was the front girl of that band, and she left to do Team Dresch.
Oh my
and
goodness!
she went on
yeah.
to do big stuff. And so there's also Wayne, the artist who did the Daddy's flyers.
Can't remember his last name. It's in my phone there because I did ask them that question. I do have the answer.
Man, we played basketball against them for
A band?
yeah, Billy Jack.
Billy Jack, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So how does Matt Klein come into the picture? You'd moved to Eugene.
Well, I was still in Grants Pass. Matt Klein had moved to San Francisco, and he was in a band called Sick to Death, which was one of the greatest punk rock bands that I had ever seen in my life. And they blew me away several times. And Ashland had a really good punk rock scene when we were youngsters. So when my band started to kind of fizzle out, the first person that I thought about was Matt. He always killed me whenever they played. And so I shuffled around some numbers, and I found him down in San Francisco. And I said, hey, if I move down there, you want to play something? And he wasn't doing anything at the time, and so we did. And then I moved to Oakland, and then I moved to San Francisco, and it was too expensive for us, so we shared a room.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we also shared a practice room. So we put all of our equipment together, and basically you had a rehearsal space in our flat in Fell and Haight in San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice.
With John Hudson being our roommate down the hallway, who now plays with Faith No More.
Right, nice.
And he would come in and play with us every once in a while, too. In fact, one day I'll have to dig up a song that we all played together called I Can't Die. And John wrote the lyrics. I don't normally sing other people's lyrics, but we did the bass on a synth. Yeah, we were 4-tracking.
Nice.
But that was the beginning of where 2 Minutes Hate started. But we didn't have a band name at that point. And Leslie Stevens actually pulled 2 Minutes Hate from George Orwell, 1984.
Right.
And that's where the name started. And then after that, we started coming across it's not too difficult to dig that cool band name up out of a book. So we'd be traveling around and find other people with the same name. And then we had to change the Thresher.
Yeah, this is before the internet, kids.
Yeah.
It wasn't
no
quite
internet,
easy to
no.
go out there.
We were on payphones.
Yeah. So 2 Minutes Hate, I don't know, Andy wanted me to ask you about a carcass that you used to wear.
Oh, boy.
Yeah? Is that a story you can tell the kids?
Yeah, well, my friend Amber Garrett pulled off the side of the freeway at one point and grabbed a roadkill that she thought that I would enjoy. And at that time, I mean, in Eugene and even down here, a lot of us took what we needed to make art out of. You know, we stole a lot from each other, from other people.
That's
people
a beautiful
who were
thing.
sleeping. we took their stuff.
I'll take that. I need it for art.
I need this for art. Thank you.
But Amber thought that I would appreciate this rib cage. It was fairly decomposed at the time. But I was just hanging out with my friend Adam Glogauer, and you guys might remember him from Nell William or Jasper.
Oh, Nell William. Sure, totally.
And a couple of other awesome Eugene bands, too. Yeah. And a fantastic drummer and a great songwriter. And Adam I love him. I lived in his place. He lived in the basement. I lived up above, and I had a bunch of bones decomposing in my closet right above his drum kit. And he was nice enough to forgive me for that. But yeah, I did use that at a Wow Hall show.
Yeah, I was going to say, I heard it was at the Wow Hall.
And I had it in a bag, and I saved it for a song that I wanted to dedicate to my friend Chris Yanitik, who committed suicide. And I wanted to dedicate a song called Bad Dead to him. And I saved it for that song.
Wow.
And that was kind of my memorial for him. But yeah, it did clear out the front of the stage a little bit. It smelled really bad.
Yeah.
I had some elbow length gloves, and I just shoved my hand right through the center of the rib cage and held my microphone at the top of it. And this is at the Wow Hall.
Yeah.
I think it was Gashdig, us, and Hittingbirth, I believe.
Wait, so Gash Dig was the opening band.
Yes.
And then and it's funny. It's funny
amazing.
that you bring up Hittingbirth, because I interviewed Daniel Riddle for this podcast, right? And he was just so outside my comfort zone, because he's like King Black Acid and Hittingbirth, and I don't really even know this dude, and I'm going over to his house, kind of a thing. The same thing occurred. Like, I was like, okay, so if we had a dead animal carcass and we'd bring it up on stage, is that something we could even do now with the Wow Hall? And we were talking about, like, he's all like, oh, in Hittingbirth we would use, like, what do they call them? Coffee creamer bombs. Remember those?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, making this
cool.
And his
pyro.
response was, why would I want to do that now? And I'm like, that kind of makes sense, right? Like, that's kind of a... kind of, Because I'd be all like, hey, kids, don't do what Scott just did by putting your arm up an animal's carcass. But it does sound cool, and it makes for a good story.
And all of our bands put a lot of effort into the performance.
Right.
And to the experience for people who were coming to see it.
Well, I'm going to chime in here again. I've said before that people have talked about the Eugene scene opposed to like the Seattle scene at the time. The big difference was we were more of an art rock scene.
Yep.
There was
big time.
Our visual ideas of what we were going to do was just as important as the music. It all kind of came together as like a whole, an act. And the way Andy dressed, the way you guys put on a show, it all influenced. Jolly Mon with their masks and all those tubes and everything else. They weren't doing that in Seattle.
No.
I mean, so to say that we were some sort of like
we were the stepchild back then.
Yeah, it was like there was a definite art scene thing going on.
But you know what? We would go up to Portland and Seattle and Eugene when we were in our prime with you guys, Jolly Mon, us, and the punk rock bands, Oswald, Billy Jack, and everybody was so arty and creative. And when we went up there, they were doing L.A. kind of stuff. Like,
right. You mean up in Portland and Seattle?
It was leather and boas. And we had like projections and lights and
shirts, dude,
and
with the,
crazy weird stuff going on. And now, what's their scene like right now? I couldn't even tell you.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And in fact, I think tonight we'll put on a better show than anything that's going on in Seattle. And we're going to do it in Grants Pass.
Heck yeah. Absolutely, man. Totally.
I'm telling you.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. So how did 2 Minutes Hate become Thresher? So you went from, what, a 5 or 6 piece to a 3 piece?
Well, we had a couple of really good drummers come and go. G. Von Valpy, Wade Murph, excellent drummers. And that was always Nick, who is After the Rain's drummer now, was originally supposed to be the guy who met us in Eugene to fill out the band, but he didn't make it. So we had Rick Jackson, who was an excellent drummer, hung around for a little bit. G-Von came around and said, I think I can make you guys a little better. We'll try it. Wade came around and said, and did make us better. In fact, we have an entire album of his that will never be put out because he kind of left us hanging. So the Thresher Black album will never be released.
Until we get somebody to mix it.
Uh-huh. But Keith sat down behind the kit, and when we first met, he was a drummer, and he could do it.
Oh, right, okay.
He wasn't Wade and he wasn't G-Von, but he could play. And so we reduced to a 3-piece at that point, and I think that we actually did some of the best stuff that we ever did at that point. And then we got seduced a little bit by electronics and things like that, when computer recording and looping and
samples and all that stuff.
Yeah, we got sucked into it a little bit, and I wish we would have taken Matt's advice, and Matt resisted it all the way through because Matt's pretty punk rock through and through.
He is pretty punk rock.
That's how I met him, and that's how he never wavered on that, and he resisted it. But me and Keith were like, this is the way we have to move forward, and from Penny Nails being real raw rock album, 5-piece, to Portal U being a 3-piece, which was raw and fun. And then Collide, the third album, being a little more computerized. I think it was the end of us, actually. Nobody wanted to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. It would be like if we put a computer behind you guys, you would lose interest real quick. Right. And that happened with Matt, that happened with me. And we just kind of didn't want to do it anymore.
And this is obviously before TV 616.
Yep.
Right? Because Poor Little You, just to go back really quick, Poor Little You, That literally has never left my iPod as long as iPods have existed.
It's a good record.
I still have two. My 15-year-old daughter has completely worn out my Thresher shirts, but her favorite one is a limited edition run where it's like this like Jack in the Box and like the scary Jack in the Box guys up there.
Only a couple
it's
of
the
those.
Stylized Thresher, and she loves it. She loves that shirt. There's many a family picture that it, like she's wearing a Thresher shirt in. So
yeah, we really had we just kind of peaked at a point where I think Poor Little You was our, where we kind of came to a peak, and if we would have continued on that course, we would have been better. But we got, digital recording started to come around, and everybody would get seduced by the technology around and kind of forget about your punk rock and, look at what we can do.
So again, like I'm with you. And there's an element of rock and roll and sort of punk that gets kind of lost when you sort of induce that. So Collide was the last record for Thresher. Is that correct?
Yep.
And so was there a bunch of kind of electronic stuff sort of
There were
thrown
some
into
remixes
there?
and stuff after that.
Okay.
There's a remix album.
Was that recorded in Portland?
Yep.
Okay.
And some of it, I think, is humorous. The rest of it, I think, is forgettable. I really think that TV was much better live band than on recording, because we never really kept the nastiness around. It just was too clean.
I remember seeing you guys at like Ash Street and a few other sort of bigger places after I had moved to Portland.
We were brutal live.
Dude, you guys were brutal.
We were brutal, but on recording it wasn't brutal.
It was hard. It was hard. No, it was hard to translate for sure.
But somewhere in between there, before, what prompted you to move to Portland?
Just the boredom of Eugene.
Was it?
And we were playing with a bunch of people from Portland.
Right. It kind of made sense. Like it was the next logical step, right?
Gashtig and Iomi Stubbs and Anzio Bridgehead and there was and Hittingbirth included, actually.
Right.
There was a whole bunch of people up there. We're like, let's go.
So did you move up there before Floater?
Yep.
I wasn't sure, because Jolly Mom was kind of in flux at the time, and I'm not sure because they Carey lives up there now. I think they all kind of
we played with Jolly Mon a couple of times up there.
Yeah.
They had different lineups, and Carey. I really like Carey playing the bass.
Yeah.
When he plays bass and somebody else is playing guitar, that gets me going. And we played a show in Vancouver once, and man, I was outside begging somebody to come in. Like the buses were empty, and that town is weird.
Yeah.
And so
Vancouver's a trip.
Yeah,
totally.
But Jolly Mons had, they had just kind of come back out, and we got an opportunity to open for them, and we took it. But at the same time, we couldn't get anybody to come in the damn room.
Right.
But it wasn't because the music wasn't any good. It's because we were in Vancouver, Washington.
That's part of it. That's part of it. And it's funny. I mean, my theory now with a lot of this sort of stuff going around and sort of getting back together and all that is that there's just so much competition for entertainment. I mean, back when our bands were out playing, you didn't have Xbox, you didn't have Netflix, you didn't have all this. You didn't really have the internet per se. That was competition for getting bands out there. So how did Portland end for you? Did you just move back to Grants Pass and start doing music? Because I remember seeing online, which again is sort of the blessing and the curse of this whole thing, Iceland, which was like just, Iceland was just brutal live. Loved it. Thought it was really awesome because your singing style fit so perfect with all of that. Was that just a band that you had down here?
No, that started with me and Nick up in Portland, and really, I think Becky put it perfectly the other day that I've been kind of a chameleon throughout the course of my, at least vocal career, in that, I can sing for a rock band, I can sing for a metal band, I can yell if you need me to do it. But what I prefer to do is go back to my roots, and that is, The Cure, Bauhaus, Joy Division, Love and Rockets. Iceland was a step back to where I belonged. I felt comfortable in my own skin. And
you could tell.
Yeah.
From the little splices that I got from online, which was probably just somebody with a camcorder or whatever, kind of recording it. I mean, it sounded like you. Like I'm stuck in that poor little you sort of like Robert Smithy high kind of like.
Yep.
But it's not Robert Smith. It sort of is done over this bed of like just, this wall of.
That has a lot to do with the other people, and I say this then, and I say it now, that Nick's drumming, and now Jamie Parfit, who I think you're really going to enjoy his bass playing tonight.
Nice.
I rely on those guys, and so if you look back at the other bands, or at least the bands that I'm influenced by, they rely on that the drummer and the bass player to hold it down. Sometimes I don't play at all. Just to let them go.
Yeah,
and
totally.
to give the music space. And so, it kind of had to go full circle you guys, you, Rich, Andy, everybody who's ever been involved has gone through all these, like, cycles of what kind of music, gets people off, and what kind of music creates a mosh pit, what kind of punk,
Totally.
what do you got to do to get people to move forward, or how do you engage them?
Right.
And so at some point you realize, are you trying to do it, or is it just happening naturally? Do people naturally want to gravitate to your music, or how many metalheads have you seen yell from the front of the stage, because they're pissed off because people won't move forward enough.
Right.
Come on, motherfuckers. We never did that. Come on, get up here. You shouldn't have to tell people to come to you.
Right.
So what I realized later on was maybe I was pushing people off.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe some people might enjoy me pretending to puke on them, or throwing fake blood on them, Guar style. But later on in life, I'm starting to realize that you play a certain kind of music that brings people to you.
Right. And naturally gravitates towards
Yep.
it. And I've only heard one song from After the Rain, which was what you had sent me when we were kind of putting the show together, right? Like we were kind of putting it together and figuring out how we were going to do it. And you did sound very comfortable, and it sounded a little bit kind of Bauhaus. I mean, again, so we only have our points of reference of what they are, but it definitely sounded not only in your wheelhouse, but also in a very cool, sort of like a relatable kind of way, to me at least. So what do you think After the Rain is going to do? Are you guys going to maybe put out a record?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to get some recording done? Tell me about that.
We will. We filled the set a little bit with a couple of crowd pleasers, but they're real random. So
Like
might
what?
be
Like what am I going to hear tonight?
I'm not gonna tell you.
You can't.
That.
Oh, see, I thought maybe I'd get inside track. Got it.
We got a captive audience.
Yeah. And we do the same too. But we
I love that.
We have enough audacity to blend Black Sabbath and Rush into one of our songs.
Yeah.
And it just kind of accidentally, organically happened.
I love that.
And it's one of those things that literally is just, it's so egotistical that I'm hoping we actually play it tonight.
And two very polarizing bands, like
Right, you have nothing to do with each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Other than one of it came up with Andy. It's like I told him the rhythm. That's the same rhythm as a Rush song.
yeah.
That's Tom Sawyer.
Don't spill the
Tom
beans,
Sawyer.
Rich.
Yeah.
Anybody that's seen us knows.
Anyway, so After the Rain is going to record a record.
Yep. We have some plans to record. We have all the original material to do it. We've been filling a little bit with covers just to get it done, because my previous band, Luna Volta, we dissolved it. And it was a little too heavy for me.
Luna Volta was too heavy for you? Okay.
I didn't feel like I was in my own skin. I felt like I was playing music that other people wanted to play.
Right.
And that I was able to do it, but I didn't. That's not what I wanted to do.
Wasn't in your heart, man.
So with After the Rain, we have more than enough original stuff for recording. And then we made contact with the guy who's willing to do it, or I'll just do it myself. I mean, we can record in our own
That
room.
is the one thing that has changed a lot since we were
Yeah, we
coming
couldn't
up
do
with
that.
Remember
how hard it was to get a good recording in Eugene?
Yeah, but in some ways I miss that. I miss the, you better know your shit.
Yeah.
Because it's costing you money.
Yeah.
And you can't go in there and fuck
True.
around. You got it because if you don't know your shit, you're gonna have to do it over
Yeah.
and over again. And every minute is costing you money.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I remember Keith telling me you got $50 to finish your vocals.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
So I mean,
You got $50
this whole
to finish.
idea of like, oh, we can do it again. We can do it again. We can do it again. It's like, I don't know. It's like an Ouroboros, man. It's like this infinite loop that just you got to learn how to put some parameters on yourself, and put some brakes. But I like the idea of just going in there and maybe even blocking off and saying this is what we're going to do in this much time, and you get what you get.
Well, I like the idea of being well rehearsed and going somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm sure, Tom, you've probably been part of this, having to wire a room, and, it's a lot of work.
It's a
Oh, yeah.
Isolating and making sure everybody is where
Sure.
they're at and where they're comfortable. So sometimes that is worth paying somebody to do. But back in the day, that would be a $250 an hour job. Like, I wanted to do it as a
Like
career.
a career, sure. Yeah.
But it's not a realistic career anymore.
Yeah.
And just like being in radio, like I wanted to be in radio after my dad. It's
all changed. Look at distribution.
He's not in there.
Look at distribution now. I mean, that doesn't even exist. I remember getting on Dutch East India distribution, and we're going to be in Tower Records in Texas. And I thought that was like the thing, man. And now it's like,
it's gone.
Yeah.
it's like if you want a shot of low self-esteem, go type in 7-year-old bass player plays Primus, And there'll be like 3 kids on there that are just doing amazing,
Hey, it doesn't matter how you play if you can't write a song.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's 100% true.
Right.
There's a complete difference between ability and songwriting.
Yeah.
If you can be the biggest prodigy ever, but what clicks? What gets into the ear? What does this for people?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you. It takes, unless you're Prince or David Bowie, it takes people.
Right.
So without
that's
you
true.
guys, and I really appreciate you guys being here, I'm nervous to play in front of you guys.
You're amazing, baby.
Yeah, you don't need to be nervous.
But
To play in front of you.
other people are going to take in something tonight, and they're going to witness what people do together.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, not all of us can be, we're not all virtuosos.
No.
We're all, and I tell this to people, even at my work, you're just the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
So you can either be part of it, or you can, that's how people find their way out
Sure.
of,
Right.
of a project,
Right,
by
no,
not
totally.
being the sum of the parts. But you guys, and I can't wait to see Andy, and I'm privileged to be on your podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And what we're going to do tonight is people are going to walk out of there kind of tripped out, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
In a good way, I
I
think.
just want people to understand that this is real. This is local music. We made this from here. We didn't have to come in from somewhere else, because we've played with a lot of bands from all over the nation, and it's like, it doesn't mean anything. What means something is just raw talent and getting together and digging and making it work.
Yeah.
Because we're at the point now in our lives and our careers that you're only doing it because you love it. There's nothing else in
No
it.
shit.
And of course, you have to have that creative outlet, or else so you don't go around at night and
Light
things
stuff
you
on
shouldn't
fire, and
right. You gotta have an outlet.
I do that.
You've been good about it, though.
Yeah, totally.
But you need an outlet. You know what I mean? And I won't. I mean, there's no reason to stop.
No.
Why would you stop?
Not when you have creativity to offer.
Sure.
And right here in Grants Pass, people will love you for it, because there isn't a whole lot. I mean, there's a variety of different genres that are successful around here, but rock and alternative rock
Cover bands.
are deficient.
Yeah.
You know, you want to go out and see country and reggae, you can do that.
Right.
And it's good.
And metal, probably.
And, no.
Really, not even metal, because metal is the strangest thing to me, and we've spoken about this, and I know I'm going off topic here a little bit, but it just never dies. I love metal, but the fact that it's a young man's game.
I agree. That's why I don't scream anymore.
But it just keeps propagating itself.
Here's what I'll tell you, Rich, is, and Tom, I think you'll agree with me, is that metal is the only genre that thinks it always has to keep pressing. Like jazz doesn't do it.
It really doesn't know when to stop.
It doesn't know when to stop.
Yeah, that's
so, I mean, how extreme does it need to go?
Right.
Nowadays, like, they keep wanting to press farther into, like, black and dark.
Right.
You know, like, metal can't just be metal. Like,
it can't be melodic. It can't
have
a groove to it or anything.
It just has to be,
right.
and the singer just seems to get worse along the way.
Right. Yeah.
So what you want is just kind of a groove and and heavy riff, but you don't get that anymore. So
the metal that we grew up on was melodic. Mm-hmm. You had your Judas Priest and your Iron Maiden bands like that. It's like it never went away from good songwriting.
Yeah.
You know, there was good songwriting and they had hooks. You know, it was still pop.
And the lyrics meant something, and the singer mattered, and the drummer was great, and the guitar solos were awesome.
Yep.
But now it's kind of, that's a genre of music that's kind of gone astray, where, you know, there's our alternative rock, and, you know, I would say that we fall in kind of a post-punk genre.
Okay.
But the two go together well.
Yeah.
Sometimes
they do.
Sometimes we will be rocking. Other times we'll be playing real small. Yeah. But metalheads, unfortunately, they've gone too far away from me to.
If they lose the dynamics, that's, to me, they've lost me.
There you go. Not enough rise and fall.
Exactly, right. So tension and release is incredibly important for songwriting, for sure.
Got to go somewhere.
Absolutely.
Not a cul-de-sac of noise.
Right. Well, dude, we're looking forward to the show tonight.
Hey.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be fun.
You got any plans to come up to Portland? And of course, man,
we will
totally.
Be.
Well, we'll look forward to After the Rain. When you get a couple songs, let me know. We'll put them on the podcast and let everybody hear them.
All right.
Thanks, Scott, for stopping by.
Thanks, Tom.
The hotel room.
Thanks, Rich.